My name is Sophia Bennett, and right now, I'm sitting in the corner office of a skyscraper in downtown Chicago, a corner office that once existed only in my imagination. The glass wall stretches from floor to ceiling, and the city hums beneath me like an endless engine of possibility. My silk blouse clings gently against my skin. I can still feel the faint warmth of the morning sun that poured in just a few minutes ago. On the mahogany desk in front of me, a single folder rests unopened. It arrived less than an hour ago, hand-delivered. The embossed lettering on the front carries a name I thought I had buried years ago, Harper and Klein Investments. My phone buzzes against the wood, a vibration that feels sharper than it should. A message from an old contact. They want to meet. They've realized their mistake. I almost laugh, except the sound would taste too bitter on my tongue. These are the same men who once leaned back in their leather chairs, looked me in the eye, and told me my business plan was cute but not realistic. The memory still stings, not because they doubted me, but because in that moment I almost doubted myself too. Now, years later, I sit here, their refusal fueling every brick of this empire. I adjust my blazer, exhale slowly, and for the first time in a long time, I let myself imagine the look on their faces when they finally see who I've become. The girl they dismissed is gone. The woman waiting for them is something entirely different. I still remember the weight of that conference room door as I pushed it open, clutching my neatly bound proposal like it was a lifeline. I was 24, fresh out of grad school, and carrying more hope than sense. My hands trembled just enough that I kept them under the table when I sat down, hoping no one would notice. The partners at Harper and Klein Investments barely looked at me as I spoke. 3 men in tailored suits, each with the kind of confidence that comes from being told, yes, too many times in life. Their watches gleamed under the fluorescent lights while I poured out my heart about a platform I knew could change the industry. My voice wavered only once when I said, "All I need is someone to believe in me." The oldest partner leaned back, smirk tugging at his lips. "Miss Bennett, your idea is cute, but unrealistic. This isn't a hobby market, it's business." And frankly, he let his gaze sweep over me, slow and dismissive. "You don't strike me as someone ready to play at this level." The words hit harder than I expected. My throat tightened, my cheeks flushed, and for one awful second, I thought I might cry right there in front of them. But then I felt something in my pocket, the smooth edge of a small silver pendant my grandmother had given me the night before. She'd pressed it into my palm and whispered, "Promise me you won't let anyone convince you that you're smaller than your dream." I curled my fingers around it, forcing myself to study. I thanked them for their time, gathered my papers, and walked out with my head high, though inside, I was cracking. On the train ride home, tears blurred the city lights until they looked like streaks of fire. Rejection burned, yes. But beneath the hurt, a spark refused to die out. I heard my grandmother's voice again, clear as day. "Smaller than your dream? Never." By the time I stepped off that train, my decision was made. If no one was willing to back me, I would back myself. That night, I opened my laptop, stared at a blank screen, and typed 3 words at the top of a new document. Bennett Enterprises, LLC. The first step into the unknown. The first step into becoming the woman I am today. The early days were brutal. My apartment doubled as my office, my dining table permanently buried under stacks of papers, sticky notes, and half-empty coffee mugs. I didn't have investors, fancy offices, or a polished team. What I had was stubbornness, a cracked secondhand laptop, and a dream that refused to shut up. I worked nights after my day job, teaching myself coding, marketing, and finance through free tutorials and borrowed books. Sometimes I would fall asleep with my forehead pressed against the keyboard, waking up with the imprint of keys on my skin. My friends were out at bars, posting pictures of rooftop parties, while I stayed home building wireframes and pitch decks that nobody but me would see. But the universe has a way of sending you lifelines when you least expect it. Mine came in the form of Rachel Alvarez, a senior consultant I met at a networking event I almost skipped because I couldn't afford the entry fee. I had volunteered to help at the check-in desk, just for a chance to be in the room. Rachel noticed me scribbling notes during a panel discussion, and later, she struck up a conversation. "You got the kind of fire most people fake," she said, scanning the prototype I nervously showed her on my phone. Unlike the suits at Harper & Klein, Rachel didn't dismiss me. She asked sharp questions, poked at weak spots, but never once told me I wasn't capable. Under her mentorship, I refined my pitch, cut the fluff, and started small. My first client was a local boutique willing to take a chance on me. The check they handed me wasn't much, but when I deposited it into my business account, my hand shook. It wasn't about the money, it was proof. Proof that someone was willing to pay for what I had built. From there, momentum grew slowly, painfully, like a sapling pushing through concrete. There were months I barely made rent, weeks I questioned if I was out of my mind. I fought stereotypes daily, men assuming I was just the assistant, vendors asking to speak to the boss, while looking right past me. Every slight, every underestimation, only fueled me more. Then came the breakthrough. A mid-sized retailer agreed to license my platform for a 6-month trial. I remember signing that contract at a coffee shop, the paper trembling in my hands, the barista calling my name for a latte as if the entire world hadn't just shifted. For the first time, I allowed myself to dream bigger. Still, I stayed quiet online, posting only vague updates. I didn't want my family or those men at Harper & Klein to know anything. Let them think I was struggling. Let them underestimate me. Because one day, when the time was right, I would show them. And, oh, that day was coming. The day they walked back into my life, Chicago was cloaked in the kind of crisp autumn air that makes the city's skyline shimmer like steel and fire. I had just finished reviewing quarterly reports when my assistant buzzed in. "Ms. Bennett, your 3 o'clock has arrived." I stood, smoothing the fabric of my blazer, heart steady but alert. I already knew who was waiting. The same men who once smirked at me across a polished boardroom table, Harper, Klein, and Matthews. Only this time, the meeting wasn't on their turf. It was in my world. The elevator door slid open, and the trio stepped into the reception area of Bennett Global Industries, their eyes darting around like tourists in a foreign land. The marble floors gleamed under their shoes. Walls were lined with modern art curated from local women artists. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking sweep of Lake Michigan. And at the center, my logo, etched into glass, BGI. I let them wait just long enough to feel the weight of the space. When I finally stepped out of my office, their faces betrayed them. A flicker of surprise, then disbelief, and finally something that looked dangerously close to envy. "Gentlemen," I said smoothly, extending a hand. "Welcome to my headquarters." Harper cleared his throat, trying to recover his old confidence. "Ms. Bennett, Sophia, this is impressive." Impressive. I tilted my head, letting the word linger. That's one way to put it. Some might call it the result of a cute but unrealistic business plan. Their silence was delicious. Klein shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Matthews glanced at the logo again, as if trying to make sense of it. I gestured for them to follow me into the boardroom. The space was intentionally intimidating, a long glass table, 12 leather chairs, digital screens alive with live metrics of our global reach. On the far wall hung the framed contract from that very first boutique, a quiet reminder of where it all began. Once seated, I leaned forward. "So, you asked for this meeting. What is it you want?" Matthews tried first. We recognize the innovation you've achieved. Your platform is leading the market. We'd like to explore a partnership. Perhaps even an acquisition. The irony was almost too rich. These men, who once dismissed me without a second thought, were now sitting across from me, asking for a piece of what I had built. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I let the silence stretch, studying their faces. I wanted them to feel the reversal, the undeniable shift in power. Finally, I spoke, voice calm but razor-sharp. "Years ago, I asked you for belief. I didn't need money, not really. I needed faith. You refused me. You didn't just reject a plan, you rejected me. And now, here you are." Klein swallowed, his bravado cracking. "We underestimated you. Clearly. A small smile curved on my lips. That's the thing about underestimating women. We're very good at turning it into fuel. Their eyes flicked to each other, silently calculating, trying to regain some ground. But it was too late. The balance of power had shifted forever, and they knew it. As the meeting drew on, I could see the cracks in their armor widen. The suits, the smirks, the arrogance, all stripped away by the reality of sitting in a room built brick by brick from the dream they once dismissed. By the time I closed my leather portfolio, there was no doubt left in the room. The woman they had once patronized was gone. In her place sat the industry leader, the one they had no choice but to reckon with. For a long moment, none of them spoke. The silence felt heavy, like the pause between lightning and thunder. I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of my position sink into the room. For once, I wasn't the one waiting for approval. I suppose this is the part, I said softly, where I decide how generous I want to be. Their heads snapped toward me. Harper's jaw tightened. Klein tapped his pen nervously against the glass table. Matthews tried a smile, the kind men wear when they're desperate. You've built something extraordinary, Sophia, Harper said finally. All we're asking for is a chance to collaborate. Collaborate? I repeated, tasting the word. Funny. When I asked for that once, you laughed. I let them squirm before continuing. Here's the thing. I don't need your money. I don't need your validation. What I could use is accountability. Their brows furrowed. Accountability? Klein asked. Yes. If we're to do anything together, it won't be on the old terms. It will be on mine. I folded my hands neatly. First condition, mentorship. For every dollar you want to put into my company, you will match it in scholarships for women in business schools across the Midwest. Non-negotiable. Klein blinked. Matthews coughed. Harper shifted uncomfortably. Second, I continued, my voice even. You will open your doors to female founders, not just a token seat at the table, but real opportunities. I want quarterly reports proving it. Their silence was almost satisfying. I pressed on. And third, I paused, letting my gaze sweep across them. You will publicly acknowledge your past misjudgment. Not to humiliate you, but because women coming after me need to see that powerful men can admit when they were wrong. The weight of my words filled the boardroom. Outside, the city lights flickered against the glass, a reminder of the world I had fought to claim as mine. Matthews broke first. These are significant asks. I smiled, calm and unyielding. They're not asks. They're terms. You don't have to agree. You can walk out right now. But if you stay, if you sign on, then you align yourselves with the future instead of clinging to the past. For the first time in years, I saw something genuine in their faces. Not arrogance, not pity, something closer to respect and maybe a touch of fear. I stood, smoothing my blazer. So, gentlemen, what's it going to be? They exchanged glances, three men who had once dismissed me without hesitation, now trapped by the gravity of my success. I could feel the shift in the air, the power no longer theirs to wield. Whatever decision they made, one truth was undeniable. I had already won. They eventually agreed. Of course they did. Men like Harper, Klein, and Matthews couldn't afford to ignore the future anymore, and I was the future staring them in the face. But it wasn't their signatures on a contract that mattered most to me. It was the shift inside myself, the realization that I no longer needed their validation, their approval, or their money. The real victory was walking out of that boardroom and into the hallway where my team was waiting. Young women and men who had believed in me from the start, who had chosen to build something from nothing beside me. Their cheers, their smiles, their pride, that was my empire. In the weeks that followed, news outlets picked up the story. Headlines called me the woman who outpaced the giants, the disruptor of the decade. My face appeared on magazine covers I used to flip through in grocery store aisles, wondering if women like me would ever belong there. Now I knew the answer. We didn't just belong, we led. But the moment that mattered most wasn't public. It was quiet. Late one night, I sat in my office, the city lights glittering outside like 1,000 reminders of possibility. I reached into my desk drawer and pulled out that silver pendant my grandmother had given me all those years ago. I held it in my hand, the metal warm against my palm, and whispered, "I kept my promise." I thought about the younger version of me, the girl on the train with tear-stained cheeks and a crushed proposal clutched in her bag. She would never have believed this was possible, but she kept going anyway. And because she didn't quit, I could stand here now, not just surviving, but leading. Sometimes people ask me if I ever think about those men who refused my business plan. The truth is, I don't think of them often, because they were never the story. I was. My dream was. And every woman who dares to believe in something bigger than herself, she's the story too. As I closed the pendant back into its velvet case, I smiled to myself. The girl they underestimated became the woman they could never ignore. And that's all the closure I'll ever need.